We've been following what was an active shooting situation in Midtown Manhattan. New information continues to come into our newsroom, but what we can report right now is that at least 4 people have been shot, 2 police officers and 2 civilians, and sadly, one of the officers has died. We're still waiting for an update on the conditions of the others. We've also learned that the suspect shot and killed himself. Now, CBS News has obtained new security camera images from the scene. Sources tell us the shooter walked into the building at 345 Park Avenue. There is the suspect that we are looking to confirm is indeed the suspect. He's carrying an AR-style weapon by his side there. He's wearing sneakers, and it looks like black pants and a blazer and a collared shirt there. He went to the 33rd floor and started shooting. FBI agents are now on the scene with the identity of the gunman and his motive still unknown. And we know that there was also a lot of focus on a black car that was parked outside this building, again at 345 Park Avenue. That's between 51st and 52nd Street. There's that car. Now, officers, after the shooting, a few hours after the shooting, or an hour at least after the shooting, the attention was on that black car. And it's unclear whether or not that is indeed the suspect's car or how it is related to this shooting. But as you can see, there are officers opening up the car doors. They also looked into the trunk. At one point, they were able to open the trunk. It looked like it was empty, but for a while, it looked like after the scene was apparently safe, they were focusing their attention on that car. Now, we know the building, which is massive, it houses big companies like the NFL, the Blackstone Group, Bank of America. There was a gym, there's a parking garage. Also, KPMG was in this massive building there on Park, between Park and Lexington and 51st and 52nd Street. There were restaurants as well. And so there's a massive, massive crime scene still there, by the way, in Midtown Manhattan. Some people that were inside the building were forced to evacuate. Others were told to shelter in place while officers combed through each room, each level of that building. And apparently, again, there is the suspect that law enforcement is saying is the suspect in this particular shooting. You see him there outside this building on 345 Park Avenue carrying that AR-style weapon. Witnesses that our reporters at CBS News New York spoke to say that they heard loud sounds on the bottom level of that building. There you go. You can see a scene outside. This is just a few hours ago of just the massive police presence that was here at this building. And just about an hour ago, you were seeing people exit the building. Many looked relieved that they were able to leave. Still, many had to leave all their belongings inside while they were safely escorted out of the building. So now the question is, was there a motive? Who was this individual? Was this individual an employee at this building? Again, this is a massive building. It houses a lot of big companies. It's on 345 Park Avenue there in Midtown Manhattan, between 51st and 52nd Street, between Park and Lex. 44 stories is how big this building is. And according to law enforcement, the suspect went to the 33rd floor. Unclear if the suspect knew somebody on that level, but clearly had intention and knew where they were going. You can see law enforcement entering the building right now. Again, 4 people were shot in this active shooting situation. 2 civilians were injured. 1 is reported in critical condition, and also 2 police officers were shot, and 1 sadly was shot and killed. Again, there is a photo of who police believe is the suspect. You see him walking there into this building on 345 Park Avenue carrying what looks to be an AR-style weapon. People were forced in this massive building, which houses big companies. Hundreds of people work there. This is the end of the workday, so you can imagine the chaos that ensued when this situation happened. It happened around 6:30 this evening, and just a couple of hours, or just an hour ago, people were finally able to leave and hopefully reunite with their loved ones. Again, this happened at 345 Park Avenue between 51st and 52nd Street, between Park and Lexington. And thereafter, the buildings were deemed safe. You could see officers really focusing their attention on that black car. Unclear if that is the suspect's car, but it seems that law enforcement believes that somehow is related to this shooting at 345 Park Street. Again, just to recap, this all took place earlier this evening. It was about 6:30 Eastern time when first reports came in of a shooting at that building at 345 Park between 51st and 52nd. Officers arrived on scene to find 4 people shot. 2 civilians were shot. We're hearing 1 may be in critical condition, and 2 officers were shot. 1 has been confirmed dead, and also reports that the perpetrator there, the suspect, shot himself. Officers were focused on this building here that houses some big companies: NFL, Blackstone Group, Bank of America, a gym, a parking garage. This is video from earlier this evening. People were told to shelter in place. Others were allowed to leave and forced to evacuate, actually. And officers just went from building to building. This is Midtown Manhattan. There's a lot of office buildings there. So some office buildings were forced to stay on lockdown, even though they weren't necessarily that particular office building. They were looking for, and also too, initially they were looking for any other devices that could be affiliated with this, possibly some incendiary devices that could be found on the premises, also potentially some sort of note, any evidence that would lead to some kind of motive to this shooting, again, happening at 345 Park Avenue between 51st and 52nd Street in the Bristol-Myers Squibb building, which is 44 stories. This is between Park and Lexington. Again, that is the suspect there that police are focusing on. And according to police reports, that suspect ended up killing himself in the building. That was after he shot 4 people, 2 civilians, 2 police officers. One of those police officers died of his injuries. Again, this is all happening in Midtown Manhattan right now. There are FBI crews, there are NYPD officers on scene, still trying to figure out how this happened, a motive behind this, and potentially any other evidence that might come out of this. Again, this is video from earlier this evening. You see NYPD there escorting people out of the building. You're also seeing some officers still with the yellow tape around the area. We're waiting on a press conference that's going to happen. We're hearing in the next hour or so with the mayor, Eric Adams, along with the NYPD, hopefully with some new information about what happened here this evening. I want to bring in a guest that we have who is Rodney Harrison, who spent 3 decades with NYPD. Rodney, thank you so much for being with us. I want to get your take on all this. Tell us what it would be like to investigate a situation like this that unfolded here this evening in Midtown Manhattan.
Yeah, so first and foremost, there's a lot of moving parts, and my condolences to the police officer that unfortunately paid the ultimate sacrifice. But going forward, the investigators are going to have to make sure excuse me, preserve the crime scene. And there's multiple crime scenes that are involved with this incident. There's the one inside 345 Park Avenue on the 33rd floor. There's a crime scene from the vehicle where the assailant came from. Once you identify who this individual is and where he came from, did he come from a hotel? Is he a New Yorker? Then we have to go to their location and see if there's any evidence that's probative that could help out with the investigation. And what I mean by that is, was he working by himself? Is he a lone wolf, or was he working with others? What's the motive? I mean, there's a lot of moving parts there, but it starts with the preservation of the crime scenes and making sure they get as much information as intel that can help out with the investigation.
I can imagine in a building of this magnitude, that's a challenge. Not only do you have what happened on the first floor, according to witnesses, but also it looks like this suspect potentially knew where he was going. He went right up to the 33rd floor. So what does it take to secure a crime scene of this magnitude? We're talking 33 stories here.
Well, listen, it may not have to be all 30 or all 33 stories. It all depends on what floors that he go to. And once again, we have to look in his background. Did he happen to work inside the building with one of the multiple different establishments in there? But this looked like there might have been like even I don't want to get too ahead of things here, but Was this a suicide mission? Was this something that he knew that he was going to take his life after he committed this violent attack? So there's a lot of work that needs to be done on the investigative end. Were there any notes involved? Did he, let somebody else know? Does he have somebody else that he's working with, or might have had a previous arrest history with that may know some of his thoughts or his mindset why he might have done this. And you take a look at the officers that were involved. They were doing what's called paid detail. This is like a off-duty type of work, doing security for a location that may be identified as sensitive or might have had a problematic history. So those officers were there protecting this location, and it's just an unfortunate and horrible, horrible incident.
It really is. As you said, those officers were doing their job, trying to protect the people that were inside that building. Just a moment ago, we saw video of officers really investigating that black car that looked like it was stopped in the middle of the road outside the building. All the doors were open. Can you walk me through, when you see that video there, sir? I'm not sure if you can see it, but them combing through the car, what are they looking for? And kind of walk me through the process there.
Well, the first thing, we want to make sure that there's no explosive device inside that vehicle. Unfortunately, too often we've seen incidents where an individual that does this type of violent attack will try to sabotage and try to hurt officers post the investigation. So we have to make sure that vehicle is clear of that. Then we also have to understand, what was behind this motive, and is there anything that could tell us something about this incident that's inside that vehicle. So once again, it's keeping that vehicle pristine and trying to recover whatever evidence that can help out with the investigation to make sure no other further incidents or other people are getting hurt from this situation continues to happen.
Now, when you think about the location that all this happened at, Midtown Manhattan, there's a camera on every city block. There's a camera outside every building, every entrance, every exit. How big a role are those cameras going to play in this?
So the cameras are going to play a major role. And if you just take a look at historical homicide investigations, Manhattan South usually is one of the leading boroughs when it comes to solving homicides, due to the fact of the technology, the cameras, and being able to identify a person involved. So those cameras are going to be extremely instrumental, identifying where he might have started from and how he got to 345 Park Avenue. But they're going to go in reverse direction now and try to trace back every single video where this individual might have come from. And listen, he might not even came from New York City. He might have came from outside New York City to this location to commit this violent act. So once again, a lot more work needs to be done.
Yeah, I thought it was remarkable. Unfortunately, we covered other major crime scenes in Midtown Manhattan this year. It's remarkable to see how quickly NYPD is able to get information on a suspect, and a little bit more information that they're willing to share with the public at that moment. Can you give us an idea, though, of how the process works when something like this happens? And obviously, the first priority is going to make sure that the building is safe, the people who are in it are safe, and in this case, the suspect apparently shot himself, and that was neutralized. But what are the next steps after the building is deemed safe and secure? What's the next steps for police officers?
Well, for police officers are going to be provide as many resources as possible to this scene to get down to the bottom of it. And it's not just the NYPD. We work with our local law enforcement agencies to help out with either tracing this assault rifle, seeing maybe where this individual came from, and working with that police department and seeing if there's any history of violence from where he might have come from. So this is a big team effort of law enforcement coming together, trying to understand what exactly happened here. But we also have to take this in consideration. Is this something that he was working by himself? Is he working with other people? And, we want to make sure that there's nothing else further going on from this horrific incident.
How long do you think this area is going to remain a crime scene? Is it going to be still a very active situation, do you think, tomorrow, given the magnitude of where this occurred?
Well, it's hard to say because it all depends on what needs to be recovered. And once again, is it if it's as simple as he walked out of this vehicle, went to the 33rd floor, and committed the act of violence without stopping in other floors, then it may not take 24 hours. But once again, is this because of the magnitude of the building and the amount of technology that they're going to have to use and go backwards regarding taking a look at video cameras to get a better understanding where this whole thing started. Believe it or not, it could take till sometime to tomorrow to get down to the bottom of it and making sure that the crime scene is squared away before they open it up to the public.
What's striking to see here also, Rodney, is the coordination between different law enforcement agencies. You have the NYPD, you have the FBI, actually you even have some members of the fire department as well. How do all of those law enforcement agencies work together? Do each of them have a distinct job, and that's what they're going in to do for these types of situations?
Yeah, so the leadership in NYPD, and it starts with the police commissioner working with in partnership with the chief department, making sure that everybody has their roles and has a integrate an integral part of the investigative steps that need to be done. So, FBI will provide their resources. The fire department will share resources regarding the building and things that maybe need to be searched with inside that location. And then, they have the NYPD investigators from homicide and other units that are going to try to capture as much evidence as possible to really get a better understanding. Once again, is still preliminary in the investigation. A lot more work needs to be done, but I'm very confident that the NYPD will get down to the bottom of it and get a little bit of a better understanding of what happened here in this incident.
New York City is the epicenter for so many big industries. It's arguably the most high-profile city in the country, if not one of them in the world. How are incidents like this handled differently in a place like Manhattan, given just the topography of the city, but also just the high profile? I mean, this is a lot of people come to visit Manhattan every single year. A lot of people work there. It's a very concentrated city. How are these types of cases investigated differently there?
Well, you got to take a look at Manhattan and Lower Manhattan, excuse me, and see the different dynamic that the investigators are going to have to deal with in contrast to somewhere like a Queens or the borough and like the Bronx. You have to deal with traffic. You have to deal with people coming from all parts of the world coming to take a closer look at what happened here. This incident is going to be such a major attraction for people who are visiting New York City, as well as New York City residents. This is something that doesn't happen every single day, especially in that lower Manhattan area. So there's a lot of different layers of concern that the investigators have to go through. I will say this. They are well prepared, they're well trained, they know exactly what they need to do in regarding to making sure they preserve the crime scene, making sure they investigate the building appropriately, making sure that nobody comes in and contaminates the location and messes up any steps in the investigation. You have some great leaders involved in NYPD, and I'm sure they'll make sure that every single step is followed to make sure they get a better understanding of what occurred.
Rodney Harrison, thank you so much for joining us and for that insight, sir. I'm sure we're going to come back to you for more expert analysis to that. All right, I want to go now to Richard Esposito. He's a former NYPD deputy commissioner and a CBS News law enforcement contributor. Thank you so much for joining us, sir. Richard, when you were watching this live coverage of this horrific scene there in Midtown Manhattan, tell us your first initial thoughts.
Your first thought is always, oh my God, it's happening here. That no matter how professional you are, that's your first thought when you've seen so many of these shootings, that it's happening again. And that's exactly what I thought when I saw it start to unfold.
Happening again, and just something that this is something that you have unfortunately had to deal with in your own career, but also watch unfold in just the past year or so. Big incidents like this, horrific incidents happening like this in Midtown Manhattan. When you're watching the officers go into action, what are you looking for? What are you seeing when we see video like this?
Well, you can see how they're going in. There's space between all the officers. They're moving carefully but quickly, and giving enough space so that if someone opens fire, they're spread out enough to make sure that he can't hit more than one person at a time. They're both heavily armed, they're armored, and it is a team that is going in um, to hunt for the perpetrator. And then you'll see other officers also have gone in to bring out the people who were huddling in the building. And you can, on your footage now, you're seeing some of the injured people that were coming out.
And, you know, when you talk about this building on 345 Park Avenue, I'm sure it's a building that you know very, very well, given its location, 51st and 52nd Streets. Between that, it's 44 stories. You know, when you're talking about a building of that size, this is complex. This is not the normal crime scene.
No, except in New York, there's preparation for this. There are packages that have been rehearsed and planned for all of the big buildings. To how do you handle a threat there in one of these buildings? The layouts are known, the setbacks are known, the security is known. There's very, very careful planning, and it's been built up over many years now. So while it's not your normal crime scene in the sense of, you know, an apartment building, for the NYPD, it's something that they do train on. Other major departments, Los Angeles as well, they train on these scenarios with some regularity because we've seen them enough of them across the country to know you have to be ready.
Right. I don't know if we have I'm speaking to my director here for a moment. Can we pull up a picture of the suspect who police believe is the suspect in this? It's going to come up here in just a moment. I want to get your thoughts and your first observations when you see this picture of this individual that police believe is the suspect. He's calmly walking into this building with tennis shoes on, carrying what looks like an AR style weapon there. What sticks out to you, sir?
I mean, what really stands out is look how calm and poised the guy is as he's walking in. You don't know what's going on in his mind, but when you look at him, he's someone who's moving. He knows where he's going. That's the first thing I thought when I saw this picture.
And also, too, does anything about the weapon strike you, other than obviously it's an AR-15 style weapon, something you don't see people carrying around? Anything else about, you know, what he's wearing or even the weapon itself?
When you look at how he's holding the weapon, and we later learned he has a permit to carry a concealed weapon in Las Vegas, and that's been confirmed by the Las Vegas. He carries it as if he knows what he's doing. And it is an assault rifle. It has, you know, a large magazine and scope and possibly a silencer or suppressor on the barrel.
And you can see that from this picture already.
You can see it from that picture, and CBS has obtained pictures of the gun after it's been recovered by law enforcement, and I'm looking at one of those right now, which shows the weapon, the bloodied weapon, lying on the floor, it looks like.
And also, too, what we saw after it was ruled that the building was safe and secure, officers were diverting their attention to a black car that was parked outside the building, and it looked like it's possibly related to the crime scene, possibly the suspect. What do you make of how they are combing through that vehicle? What are they looking for?
So, you know, I really don't know anything about that particular vehicle. But the first thing you look for suspicious packages, you look for weapons, you look for anything related to the crime, any evidence you can find. That's after you make sure there's no one in there who might be working in concert with a gunman. And then you'll see technicians out there on the scene. Bomb technicians went into the building to make sure there was nothing, no device left behind. And the reporting was there was nothing they had found as of now. They did a very thorough search of the floors that this person went on to.
What can you tell us a little bit about the procedure, too, in terms of keeping the other people who were not only in the building, but the surrounding buildings safe? We're hearing that some people were allowed to leave or were escorted out, and some people were told to shelter in place. Can you give us some kind of perspective on the thought process in terms of who gets to stay in the building, who is forced to stay in the building, who is allowed to leave? How do law enforcement officers determine that?
So look, I can't say specifically, but I will tell you the first thing they did was they put a perimeter up around this area, 2 blocks out from the building. A perimeter was formed. And in your footage, you can see the state police were involved. They have an office nearby. The governor's office is about 10 blocks from here. But first thing they did is they put a perimeter around it to make sure that no one else is at risk that's not already inside that perimeter. They then always advise people to shelter in place and then escort people out when it's safe to do so. For example, on the 33rd floor, there were reports of about 50 people who were sheltering in place, and then those people were brought out by one of the police response teams. And your footage is showing police approaching the building from all different sides. You see the armored police vehicle on the street. The bomb squad brought their vehicles in. So the judgment on who gets out is based on what they think is safe, or if someone is, or triage and someone is wounded and they need to get them out.
And you can imagine how terrifying it would be for the people that were not only in that building, but the surrounding building as well. You know, we're still hearing details about what actually happened, the chain of events that occurred. We do know that 4 people were shot. 2 of those were NYPD officers. One of them tragically died. 2 other civilians were injured. And we're hearing that the suspect managed to make it to the 33rd floor. Does that surprise you, sir, that the suspect was able to get that far, given as high profile of a building as this is and the massive businesses that it held?
No, because he had a relationship with the building and with the tenants in the building. To the best of our knowledge, he appeared to be someone who worked. This is initial reporting. I want to stress that. But someone who appears to have worked in the real estate industry, someone who has worked with some of the tenants in this building. He knew where he was going. If all of this proves to be true, he walked in with that confident stride that we saw. He knew where he was going and what floors he wanted to go to. We don't know if he had any ID that allowed him in and out of the building as well. That we just don't know yet. I'm sure police know that by now. We know he's a resident of Las Vegas, or at least has a home there, and police in New York are in touch with authorities in Las Vegas Metro PD and the sheriff's department there as well.
And sir, one more question. How long do you think this investigation is going to go on?
Until it's done. As
long as it takes.
You know, I can't tell. They've got to sort out motive if they can find that out. They've got to sort out where the weapon came from, when he got here. They'll walk their way through. It's a painstaking process and it'll take some time, but they'll have conclusions very quickly.
Richard Esposito, thank you so much for being with us and for your insight into all of this.